Ladies and gentlemen, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Viking coming of age story Cornerstone, the Song of Tyrim. Cornerstone is an open world adventure puzzle game inspired by the likes of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and other classic Nintendo 64 games. The game originated on Kickstarter, where it was successfully funded, and it has been developed by Swedish indie developer Overflow Games. The game is set in a fantasy realm of Nygard, and the story centers around a small Viking boy, Tyrim, who lives on the island of Borjana, and with his mother Alma and his younger twin siblings. After his father and all the men from the village do not return from a 7-year-long expedition, the Viking village is basically falling apart and supplies are running low due to the men taking all of the boats. Tyrim tries to help out the villagers, but suddenly essentially finds himself on a quest to find his lost father and the expedition for the sake of the village. I quite enjoyed the game's story. It did give me a nostalgic feel of a lot of N64 games. It is a little bit cliche and tropey on occasion, but it's pretty much harmless, and it's pretty quaint. It's a nice little cute story that harkens back to a very classic era. The game is a real slow starter from the very start. The first hour, 2 hours in, it really is hard work getting through that, but the story does seem to pick up after that point and gets a little bit more interesting. The game's writing doesn't really help at the start. While it does have a lot of humour that I did personally enjoy, it is a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to quality. Some of the lines are a little bit tedious and you think, oh, that was a little bit cringeworthy, but then other conversations do work fine and aren't really a problem. Apart from some narration here or there is no voice acting in the game whatsoever. The graphical side of things is a little bit better on that end. There's some really great looking locales. The entire aesthetic is a really nice, colourful, playful love letter to N64 games, and it's really nice. The game produces a solid frame rate, though there are a few camera problems when you snap into the side of a cliff, etc, but other than that, it's pretty much a straight shooter on the graphical end. The game does recommend the use of a gamepad, and I actually agree. It's a lot easier with 2 thumbsticks than it is with a mouse and keyboard. However, the mouse and keyboard controls aren't that bad. The combat controls are the main issue in the control sense. Main reason is a lot of the controls are very unresponsive. This is a major problem when it comes to combat, simply because the combat is so simplistic. The combat consists of basically blocking and then waiting for the enemy to be parried and then attacking once, twice or 3 times if you can get it in. Other than that, there is no real actual depth to the combat whatsoever. So when the controls are unresponsive and hits usually take a lot of damage, you usually ends up fights being pretty messy and problematic when it comes to enemies that do pack a punch, because if your controls are unresponsive and you mistime your hits because the controller decided it didn't want to work at that point, then you're going down and you'll have to go back to a save point. The game ultimately isn't really about combat, however. It's about exploration and puzzles. The exploration side of things is a lot of fun. Traveling across the ocean on a sailboat, going through sand dunes on a sand rider. All these types of vehicles are a lot of fun to use. I particularly enjoy the homemade wool parachute, where you can just jump off a cliff and just glide down to wherever you need to go. All that kind of thing is a lot of fun on the exploration side, and there is a lot of hidden recipes that you can use for the crafting. Puzzles don't just come in the form of your traditional door puzzles and getting the right combination to the chest. It's all about the exploration puzzles too. How am I going to traverse this mountainous environment with a 4-foot sized child? Well, ultimately that's where the crafting and the physics engine comes into play. Cornerstone is very physics based, from being able to pick up objects and throw them around, to knock branches down, or cut out the support beams under a platform. All that kind of thing you can do in the game. Crafting also plays a major role in puzzle solving and combat. You can create shields and weapons, but most importantly, you can create explosives, boxes, chests, all that kind of thing to help you traverse the environment. So if there is a giant cliff edge that you need to get up and you can't get up, then you can build an absolute ton of boxes and climb your way up. It's all about problem solving and using both the physics engine and the crafting available to you to be able to solve all the game's problems, which works really well, and it's a lot of fun to do. The crafting is fairly simplistic. It isn't as in-depth as something like Minecraft, where it's all centered around crafting and the entire game centered around crafting, but the crafting is there to give you a means to an end, and it ultimately does the job very well. There's a lot of hidden recipes that you can find, and there's a lot of cool items that you can build, such as cannons for giant enemies and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of fun to be had in Cornerstone, and I actually quite liked the variety that the game had, and I really liked the focus on physics-based puzzles and trying to, navigate this small child through a giant world. Like I said before, the crafting is ultimately the weakest point in the game. While you can lock onto targets, it isn't particularly fun, and the entire thing can end up being very frustrating. But if you can look past the lackluster combat, then the physics-based puzzles, the crafting, and ultimately the charm of the title, it's almost like a love letter to N64 games, and that's something that just harkens back and makes me feel nostalgic about my younger years, where I just think, it's really colourful, it's really vibrant, and ultimately, as a father myself, it's family friendly. You can sit down with your kids and play this and let them play it, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a harmless little indie title that has ultimately got some good quality in there. It's not perfect by any means, it has got a few sharp edges, but ultimately it definitely set out to do one thing, which was basically be a love letter to N64 games, and it does that very, very well. Funnily enough, it does this even faults and all. Even the faults themselves are, nostalgic in themselves, because I remember a lot of N64 games that had the exact same problems, like the combat, like the lack of sprinting, and it was a frustration back then as it is a frustration back now. And while you say, well, it is 2016, you probably should have sorted that out, at the end of the day, it's a small team making a small game which has quite a large scope when you actually play through the damn thing, and I quite liked it. And it was just, there was something about the game that if something had changed, if you'd have changed the aesthetic or the theme in some way, then it probably wouldn't be as charming as it is. However, as it stands, it is charming in its own little way. And for that reason alone, I think that if you enjoyed classic N64 games, then you'll probably like Cornerstone. Or if you're looking for something to pick up for your young children, then definitely do pick up Cornerstone, because it is a blast from the past. That is my review of Cornerstone, the Song of Tyrim. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you next time.